Hey guys, this is Justin. Hello and welcome to another video. So, Kenobi episode 4 just dropped. There are only 2 episodes left of this series. There's been rumors of a season 2, but as of what we know right now, 2 episodes left. So, did they come through, especially considering the circumstances with this most recent episode? Let's talk about it. As always for these videos, full spoilers, you've been warned, just know that, but let's get into it. And I'm starting to notice a trend with Kenobi. I like a lot that the show is doing. I like the character beats, I like the arcs of Kenobi and the other characters in the show, but I found the execution to be somewhat lacking, and I find it weird that people focused a lot on the new Inquisitor Reva early on in the season, because in my opinion she's actually been pretty good, and any issues regarding awkward line delivery or just awkward scenes in general I think are more structural. I'm going to get to the actual breakdown and what I liked and what I noticed in a minute, but I really want to touch on this point a little bit. This show definitely feels like it's a step down in terms of directing quality and budget when compared to The Mandalorian. I think the directing is probably similar with what we got of the Book of Boba Fett, but the visual effects really don't feel like they're up to the same level, and a really good example today is that snowspeeder scene. In my opinion, this is one of the worst special effects that we've seen in any main Star Wars property, any movie or TV show since the prequels. And some of it may come down to directing as well. Like, the speeders in this scene just aren't used in a natural way, and it's just not really a good way to end the episode. They sort of just walk past all the security, then the speeders come rescue them, so I guess it's a bit of a directing and a writing issue, but it strangely feels like this show was a little bit forced, and that's one thing that's going to be frustrating. If Disney is going to have all of these projects, they've got to give them time to breathe, and they can't impose such strict timelines that they're sacrificing quality. Quantity is good, but if we're getting quantity just in sacrifice of quality, especially where there is a good overall story here, that's going to be extremely frustrating. This episode and a lot of this show just feels like it needed more time, and that's frustrating because I was looking forward to the show, and if anything, where this is more of a mini series rather than a full TV show with seasons, at least as we know so far, this is the time where they should have used every minute carefully and made a well-crafted experience. Honestly, it's somewhat like the prequels in that sense, I think, where a lot of the basics are really good, but the execution leaves a bit to be desired. Now, hopefully, we've got 2 more episodes. Hopefully, these are the Revenge of the Sith of the Kenobi series, and we get something really good. And I'm not trying to be a hater. I'm not saying the show is awful or that it completely sucks. I don't think that's the case. I just think at times it's been mediocre, and the issues that it's had have been totally fixable. Alright, so let's move on. This episode saw Kenobi infiltrating the Inquisitor fortress on Nur. I really like that. I like the setup for this episode, and I've got to say, for about the first 2/3, this was probably my favorite episode of the series before things went a little off the rails. There were some interesting dynamics here. One I think people are maybe overlooking is Reva and Leia. Reva has continually throughout this show tried to act like some hard ass, but when it comes down to really getting her hands dirty, especially when it involves children, she shows that she's not quite up to the task. We see her having regrets about having to potentially torture Leia before she goes through with it, and she looks visibly disgusted when Vader is attacking the civilians in the previous episode. It was interesting to see their push and pull, and it was a good dynamic overall. I also like the relationship, of course, between Leia and Kenobi. My favorite part of the episode was probably at the very end when they're holding hands on the shuttle after escaping. They both warmed up to each other. I think these have been some of the best moments of the show. Same with in episode 3, where Kenobi essentially says that he wished he were her father, so it wouldn't have to be Anakin. All of that stuff has been really, really great. I also quite like the sequence at the beginning with both Vader and Kenobi in the bacta tank, both trying to deal with their own trauma in their own way. One of the most highly discussed aspects of this episode is when Kenobi walks into what is essentially the Jedi Crypt, or the Jedi pickling chamber. There are at least 2 Jedi that we know in there. First of all, we get a clear view of Terrace Anube, the Jedi from the Clone Wars, but in one of the first shots we can also see off to the side Coleman Cash, who was a Jedi on the Council in Revenge of the Sith. I'm kind of surprised Kenobi didn't actually look more closely at Coleman, given the fact that he would have served with him on the Council at the same time, but whatever. One thing the show's been doing well is continuity, so I've really liked the fact that they've been bringing all of these things into live action. I've actually first thought that the probe droid that's in the base was similar to the one from Star Wars Battlefront 2, but that's not the case. Still, there were still lots of cool tie-ins. The base itself obviously comes from Fallen Order. We get new Purge troopers. But back on the topic of the room, I thought this was pretty interesting. I think there are a few options for the Empire is doing here. The most obvious one is that this is just a trophy room for the Inquisitors, sort of a monument to all their success in hunting down the Jedi. I think that's also probably the most likely option, but there are a couple of other interesting ones. I think the least likely option is that this has something to do with experimentation on Force sensitives. The pods did remind me a little bit of what we saw on Exegol. We know from The Mandalorian and the Bad Batch that the Empire was attempting something when it came to tests or perhaps cloning of Force sensitives, so that's interesting. I think the other option is that these Jedi are getting the Luminara Unduli treatment, and for those who haven't seen Star Wars Rebels, the Empire basically made it seem like Luminara was still alive in order to try to get Jedi out of hiding, when in fact she was sort of suspended in a similar looking liquid, and it's possible that that's the same thing that's going on here. And that would also make sense too, because we know the Grand Inquisitor was involved in that other plan. Let me know what you think down below also is the more likely option. I'm wondering too whether that member of the Jedi Underground's wife is one of the ones we saw in the tanks, but anyway. I thought the base design on Nur was interesting, and I liked the initial infiltration, but as I said, I really felt like the script and the directing let down, especially the latter third or so of this episode. The escape was definitely a little underwhelming, and it feels like initially they probably had it so there was more time spent with the Jedi Underground characters, like the Resistance movement who are moving the Jedi through the path, because I gotta say, I wasn't really very emotionally invested in what was going on with that story, but I think I could have been had we spent more time learning about the specific characters. It also just feels like the first little bit of this episode was maybe more truncated than it was initially planned, and I guess that's what happens if you're on a deadline and have to get a series out. But overall, I just feel like the series, while it has great potential and while it's doing some good things, is ultimately being let down by its directing and its special effects. That doesn't mean it's bad, and I don't think it is bad, but it keeps it from being truly great like The Mandalorian and like it should be. But those are just my thoughts. Let me know yours down below. Till next time, be safe, have a good one, and may the Force be with you.